Mr. Speaker, it's my honour to stand up and speak to Bill 44, the Alberta Human Rights, Citizenship and Multiculturalism Amendment Act 2009. Mr. Speaker, human rights are an important and delicate issue for many Albertans and Canadians because no single issue is more essential to humanity than how we treat ourselves and one another. A few weeks ago, from my vantage point in this House, when it appeared that an honourable member opposite uses liberty with impunity to call some members of the government caucus inappropriate words that I don't want to mention, I'm reminded of past examples of discrimination. Mr. Speaker, it reminded me of when I first came to this country in the 70s as a child. You felt different, you looked different, and you knew you were in a cold climate, in a cold country with no family, no social supports. Your parents were adventurers to this land. But there are times when you were made to feel different. And that was the most difficult point about discrimination. Mr. Speaker, this is a nation that is founded on immigration. We are all descendants of immigrants, if we're not direct immigrants. Today, before you, you see the most diverse caucus in this nation. Mr. Speaker, human rights are defined in the Canadian Oxford Dictionary as the basic rights held to belong to every living person. My personal experience from my family, my grandfather came in 1906, and he was the first from our family to come at the age of 16. In his search for freedom for his home nation, in his home nation they didn't have freedom to speak, nor did they have freedom. In speaking to this bill, I would like to speak on freedom of speech. I think this is one of the most valuable things that we as human beings have. And at the same time, the freedom to walk down the streets and have the feeling that you belong in this society. But that freedom of speech is the right to life, liberty, justice, free thought and expression, and equality before the law. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms sets out guiding principles, and the Criminal Code of Canada defines acceptable conduct. Furthermore, the Government of Canada has addressed the discrepancy between law and practice by creating a Human Rights Commission to investigate complaints regarding human rights violations, to provide legal channels to hear the complaints, and find solutions to human rights problems. It seeks to educate all Canadians about human rights and to advocate equality of opportunity for groups in society that are frequently the target of discrimination. It does this for the good of society and because discrimination based on age, gender, race, religion, and sexual orientation is against the law. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, each province has supplemental human rights laws that cover other issues not included in federal legislation. Thus, every Canadian is legally protected from discrimination by the various levels of human rights legislation. But, in order to guarantee this legislation is effective, provincial human rights commissions oversee the application and everyday function of human rights laws. Mr. Speaker, over the past year, there has been much discussion about the effect of anti-discrimination legislation on freedom of speech. There are certain individuals who believe that Section 3 should not be included in the Human Rights, Citizenship and Multiculturalism Amendment Act. I am standing in support of this bill today on account of what it proposes not to change. It does not silence the voice of the voiceless or remove the advocate of the visible minority, of the new Canadians. Rather, it sends a loud, clear message that all human beings are to be respected and accepted and that willful discrimination will not be abided. Removing Section 3 would be inconsistent with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It could lead to unnecessary legal squabbling. And just as importantly, it sends the wrong message about us. The vast majority of Albertans, as I mentioned, are from elsewhere or descendants of folks from elsewhere. We are not narrow-minded and we are not intolerant. In fact, I would say this is one of the most tolerant societies. provinces in this nation. And the elected members are evidence to that. However, within the context of the overall human rights system, the Government of Alberta has recognized the need for a few simple yet vital important administrative changes so that freedom of speech may be maintained, which, by the way, have already begun with the introduction of a new Chief Commissioner who brings an extensive judicial background and a new focus to the position. Other necessary changes include finding ways to reduce the average time it takes to process a complaint, working to improve the general functioning of the system for all complainants, and of course expanding Section 3 to include sexual orientation. Mr. Speaker, while some may grandstand for the media and make themselves advocates and champions of freedom of speech, they continue to have that right under this legislation. Section 3 is and will continue to be an important piece of Alberta's human rights legislation because it outlines protections for those same freedoms of speech. In fact, this Act states that nothing shall be deemed to interfere with the freedom of expression or opinion on any subject. The real challenge is curtailing alarmist rhetoric and promoting common sense, a value I believe most Albertans possess in abundance. As proof of this, freedom of speech complaints account for less than 3% of the Alberta Human Rights Commission investigations. That's a good thing. This very assembly illustrates the quality of right and opportunity and the protection of the law provided by this great province. This Premier, who did not speak English until the 6th grade, has provided a great example of this. And as he pointed out, this caucus is the most diverse in this nation. Mr. Speaker, let us not divert our focus from the big picture. 97% of cases reviewed by the Alberta Human Rights Commission are with respect to areas of employment and tenancy. This legislation ensures continued protection and equality for the rights of all Albertans where they need it most, in schools, in workplaces, and in homes. I will support it and encourage all honourable members to do the same. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the honourable member from across for explaining his comment in the House, and I accept his apology, and it's truly an honour for me to be a member of this Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Truly an honour for me also to be an Albertan. Thank you.